The Forsaken Cub. Captain Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his brow as he navigated the wreckage of the Zephyrian royal cruiser. The massive vessel had crashed into the asteroid belt 3 days ago, and his salvage crew was the first to respond to the distress beacon. What they found was carnage beyond imagination. The Zephyrian Empire had been humanity's most powerful ally in the Galactic Council, ruled by an ancient feline species that had dominated space for over 10,000 years. Their technology was centuries ahead of human innovation, their warriors legendary across 12 star systems. Now their flagship lay in ruins, twisted metal and crystalline structures scattered across 3 kilometers of space debris. Marcus's boots clanged against the deteriorated hull as he made his way through the ship's corridors. Emergency lighting flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows on the walls adorned with intricate Zephyrian artwork. Bodies of the crew lay where they had fallen, their elegant forms twisted in death. The bridge was completely destroyed, the royal quarters reduced to vacuum and twisted steel. "Captain, you need to see this," came the voice of his engineer Rodriguez through the comm system. "I'm in what looks like the Imperial Nursery. There's something alive down here." Marcus quickly made his way through the debris-filled passages, following Rodriguez's beacon. The nursery was a marvel of Zephyrian architecture, even in its damaged state. Crystalline walls that once projected holographic star maps now lay cracked and dark. Floating cradles designed to simulate zero gravity hung motionless from their supports. In the corner of the room, Rodriguez knelt beside a small containment pod that hummed with emergency power. Inside, barely visible through the transparent aluminum window, was a tiny Zephyrian cub. The creature was no larger than a human infant, covered in golden fur with distinctive black stripes. Its large amber eyes stared up at them with an intelligence that seemed far too advanced for something so small. "Bioscanners show it's barely 3 months old," Rodriguez reported, checking his handheld device. "But look at these readings, Captain. The genetic markers are off the charts. This isn't just any Zephyrian cub." Marcus studied the readouts with growing amazement. The cub's DNA contained markers indicating royal bloodline, but more than that, there were genetic sequences he'd never seen before. Enhanced neural pathways, accelerated muscle development, and something the scanner could only classify as unknown evolutionary adaptations. "Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures approaching from the hegemony sector," called out Petty Officer Williams from the ship's communication array. "3 heavy cruisers definitely hostile. They'll be here in 20 minutes. The hegemony had been at war with the Zephyrian Empire for decades. If they found this cub, the last remnant of the royal line would be executed without mercy. Marcus looked down at the tiny creature, whose eyes seemed to track his movements with uncanny awareness. "We take the cub," Marcus decided. "Rodriguez, can that pod sustain life support for a long-range jump?" "It's designed to, sir, but we don't know anything about Zephyrian biology. We could be condemning it to a slow death." Marcus reached out and placed his hand against the pod's surface. The cub inside moved closer, pressing its tiny paw against the barrier where his hand rested. Something in those ancient eyes convinced him that this creature understood more than any infant should. "Prep the pod for transport. We're not leaving it here to die." The journey back to human space took 14 days. Marcus found himself spending hours beside the containment pod, watching the cub's behavior with fascination. Unlike human infants, the young Zephyrian seemed to observe everything with calculating intelligence. It tracked the movements of crew members, studied the ship's displays, and even appeared to recognize different individuals. Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's medical officer, ran extensive scans during the journey. "Captain, this is remarkable. The cub's brain development is accelerating at an impossible rate. Neural pathways that should take years to form are developing in days. It's learning at a speed that defies biological possibility." On the 7th day, something extraordinary happened. The cub, still sealed in its pod, began making specific vocalizations when different crew members approached. Not random sounds, but distinct patterns that seemed to be attempts at mimicking human speech. When Marcus approached, it would make one sound. When Rodriguez came near, it made another. It was learning to identify and communicate with each person individually. "It's trying to talk to us," Marcus realized. "At 3 months old, it's already developing language skills." Dr. Kim shook her head in wonder. "The genetic modifications in its brain are unlike anything in galactic medical databases. Someone engineered this creature for accelerated development. The question is why?" As they approached human space, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of reporting the cub to Earth Command, he filed a standard salvage report listing only recovered Zephyrian cultural artifacts. The cub would come home with him to his farm on the frontier world of New Montana, where he could raise it away from the politics and dangers of galactic civilization. The transport to New Montana was uneventful, but Marcus noticed changes in the cub during the journey. It had grown noticeably larger, and its movements were becoming more coordinated. Most remarkably, it had begun to understand basic human words. When Marcus said food, the cub would move toward the feeding mechanism of its pod. When he said sleep, it would curl up and close its eyes. New Montana was a harsh world on the edge of human space, originally terraformed for agriculture, but largely abandoned due to frequent raids by space pirates and alien predators. Marcus's farm sat in a valley surrounded by purple mountains, isolated from the small mining towns that dotted the planet's surface. It was the perfect place to raise a creature that the galaxy believed to be extinct. Marcus carefully transported the pod to his workshop, a large building behind his farmhouse that he'd equipped with basic medical and engineering equipment from his years as a salvage captain. The cub watched everything with intense curiosity as he prepared a larger habitat that could grow with the creature as it developed. The moment Marcus opened the containment pod, the cub surprised him by climbing out on its own and immediately beginning to explore the workshop. Its movements were confident and purposeful, nothing like the helpless stumbling of a normal infant. It examined tools, investigated corners, and even seemed to understand the concept of doors and windows. "All right, little one," Marcus said, kneeling down to the cub's level. "I guess you need a name. How about Aurora, after the Empress who ruled your people for 3 centuries? The cub looked directly at him and made a sound that was remarkably close to Aurora. Marcus's eyes widened in amazement. Not only had it understood that he was naming it, but it was already attempting to pronounce its own name. Over the following weeks, Aurora's development continued at an astounding pace. By the end of the first month, she had grown to the size of a human toddler and was walking upright with perfect balance. Her vocalizations had evolved into recognizable words, and she could understand complex instructions. Marcus established routines for Aurora's care and education. Mornings were spent working around the farm, where she observed how he maintained the automated systems that kept the crops growing. Afternoons were devoted to learning, using educational programs that Marcus adapted from human children's curricula. Evenings were for play and bonding, activities that helped Aurora develop social skills and emotional connections. The most remarkable aspect of Aurora's development was her problem-solving ability. When presented with puzzles or challenges, she would study them with intense concentration before finding solutions that even Marcus hadn't considered. She learned to operate farm equipment by watching him once, understood the basics of mechanical repair after observing a single demonstration, and even began to anticipate problems before they occurred. 3 months after arriving on New Montana, Aurora had grown to the size of a human child of 6 or 7 years. Her golden fur had developed complex patterns that seemed to shift in different lighting, and her amber eyes held an intelligence that was both beautiful and slightly unsettling. She could speak in complete sentences, understood mathematics up to algebra, and had begun to ask questions about her origins and the wider galaxy. "Marcus," she said one evening as they sat on the farmhouse porch, watching the sunset paint the purple mountains in shades of crimson and gold. Her voice had developed a melodic quality that was distinctly non-human but hauntingly beautiful. "Why did my people die?" Marcus had dreaded this question, knowing that Aurora would eventually want to understand the tragedy that had brought them together. He chose his words carefully, explaining about the war with the hegemony and the attack on her family's ship. Aurora listened without interruption, her expressions shifting from curiosity to sadness to something that might have been anger. "The hegemony killed my family because they feared what we might become?" she asked. "Yes," Marcus replied honestly. "Your people were powerful, and power often breeds fear in others." Aurora was quiet for a long time, staring up at the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Finally, she spoke again. "I remember things, Marcus. Not everything, but fragments. Voices, faces, feelings. I remember warmth and safety, and then coldness and terror. I remember my mother singing to me in the old language." Marcus felt a chill as he realized what Aurora was describing. Memories from when she was barely weeks old, retained with perfect clarity despite her young age. The genetic modifications that had accelerated her development had also enhanced her memory far beyond normal biological limits. "Do you remember anything else?" he asked gently. "I remember a voice, deep and commanding, speaking about preparation and destiny, about trials that would come and power that must be earned. I think—" Aurora paused, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I think my parents knew what was going to happen. I think they prepared me for it." That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about Aurora's words. The genetic modifications, the accelerated development, the enhanced memory and intelligence. None of it was accidental. Aurora wasn't just the last survivor of the Zephyrian royal line. She had been deliberately engineered for something specific, prepared for a purpose that her parents had foreseen before their deaths. As the weeks passed, Aurora's abilities continued to evolve in ways that both amazed and concerned Marcus. She developed physical capabilities that far exceeded normal Zephyrian parameters. Her reflexes became lightning fast. Her strength increased exponentially, and her senses sharpened to superhuman levels. She could hear ships approaching from orbit, smell the emotional states of humans through changes in their pheromones, and see clearly in complete darkness. The first real test of these abilities came when a group of raiders attempted to attack the farm. Marcus was in the workshop when Aurora suddenly appeared at his side, her pupils dilated and her posture tense. "Danger comes," she said simply. "3 ships, armed, hostile intent. They seek to steal and destroy." Before Marcus could ask how she knew, the farm's perimeter alarms began sounding. Aurora moved with fluid grace toward the weapon cabinet, selecting a plasma rifle with the confidence of someone who had used such weapons for years rather than minutes. "Aurora, wait," Marcus called, but she was already moving toward the door. "Stay here, Marcus. These predators threaten our home. That cannot be tolerated." What happened next would haunt Marcus for years. Aurora moved through the approaching raiders like a force of nature, her enhanced speed and reflexes making her nearly invisible in combat. She didn't kill them. Instead, she systematically disabled their weapons, destroyed their vehicles, and left them stranded and terrified on the mountainside. The entire encounter lasted less than 10 minutes. When she returned to the workshop, Aurora's expression was calm and controlled, but Marcus could see something new in her eyes. A coldness that hadn't been there before. A recognition of her own power and what it could accomplish. "They will spread word of what happened here," she said matter-of-factly. Others will think twice before threatening us." Marcus realized that Aurora had crossed a threshold. The innocent child he'd rescued was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous and complex. The genetic modifications hadn't just enhanced her physical and mental capabilities, they had been designed to create a perfect predator, hidden within the form of an abandoned cub. That evening, as they sat together on the porch, Aurora spoke about the future with a maturity that chilled Marcus to the bone. "The galaxy believes my people are extinct," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in his chest. "But extinction and transformation are often mistaken for each other. I am not the last of my kind, Marcus. I am the first of something new. The awakening power." 2 years had passed since Aurora's arrival on New Montana, and the changes in her were nothing short of extraordinary. She now stood nearly as tall as Marcus, her golden fur having darkened to a rich amber with black markings that seemed to shift and flow like living shadows. Her movements had become fluid and predatory, each step calculated and purposeful. Most unsettling of all, her intelligence had grown beyond anything Marcus could have imagined. The farm had transformed under Aurora's influence. What had once been a simple agricultural operation now resembled a fortress of advanced technology. Aurora had studied Marcus's engineering manuals for mere days before beginning to design improvements that surpassed anything in human technical databases. She had modified the farm's defensive systems, upgraded the communication arrays, and created manufacturing capabilities that allowed them to produce equipment that shouldn't have been possible with their resources. "The gravitational field generators are operating at 97% efficiency," Aurora reported as she emerged from the workshop, her claws still gleaming with the metallic dust of precision engineering. "I've managed to increase the yield of the northern fields by another 15% while reducing resource consumption." Marcus watched her with a mixture of pride and growing unease. Aurora's accomplishments were remarkable, but they came with an intensity that sometimes frightened him. She approached every challenge with the focused determination of someone pursuing a greater purpose, though she rarely spoke about what that purpose might be. The galactic situation had deteriorated significantly during Aurora's development. The hegemony had expanded their territory, conquering 3 more systems and enslaving their populations. Human space had become increasingly isolated as former allies were either destroyed or forced into submission. Trade routes had collapsed, and frontier worlds like New Montana found themselves cut off from the broader galactic community. Aurora seemed to follow these developments with keen interest, spending hours analyzing news feeds and intelligence reports that somehow found their way to their isolated farm. Marcus never asked where she obtained this information, though he suspected her technological modifications had given them access to communication networks far beyond their official capabilities. "The hegemony grows bold," Aurora observed one morning, as they reviewed the latest reports of conquered worlds. "They believe themselves unchallenged because they eliminated the Zephyrian Empire. They do not understand that empires are not destroyed by killing emperors. They are reborn through evolution." Her words carried an weight that made Marcus uncomfortable. Aurora often spoke in ways that suggested she saw herself as more than just a survivor of genocide. There were times when her comments implied that she considered herself the inheritor of some greater destiny. The first sign of Aurora's true nature revealed itself during an unexpected visit from Earth Command. Commander Janet Torres arrived unannounced with a small escort, ostensibly to check on isolated frontier settlements. In reality, Marcus suspected they were investigating reports of unusual technological activities on New Montana. Aurora sensed the approaching ships hours before they appeared on conventional scanners. She moved through the farm with silent efficiency, concealing the most advanced equipment and ensuring that their operation appeared to be nothing more than a struggling agricultural settlement. "Visitors approach with hidden agendas," she informed Marcus as she returned from her preparations. "The lead officer carries stress pheromones associated with deception and fear. She knows more about us than her official mission suggests." Commander Torres arrived with 2 junior officers and a technical specialist. She was a career military officer in her 50s, with the bearing of someone accustomed to command and the sharp eyes of someone trained to detect anomalies. Her scan of the farm was thorough but revealed nothing that contradicted their cover story. "Captain Chen," Torres said as they toured the farmhouse, "your production reports have been quite impressive for such a remote location. Some people are curious about how you've managed to maintain such efficiency despite the supply chain disruptions." Marcus provided carefully rehearsed explanations about innovative farming techniques and salvaged equipment modifications. Aurora remained in the background, observing silently while presenting herself as nothing more than an exotic pet that Marcus had acquired during his salvage operations. The deception might have succeeded if not for the technical specialist, Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, whose trained eye detected subtle inconsistencies in the farm's technology. Her scanning equipment registered energy signatures that didn't match standard human agricultural systems. "These modifications are remarkable," Dr. Hawthorne commented as she examined a grain processing unit that Aurora had enhanced. "The efficiency improvements suggest an understanding of quantum field manipulation that's beyond current human knowledge. Where did you learn to make these modifications?" Before Marcus could answer, Aurora stepped forward. Her movement was so fluid and silent that none of the visitors had noticed her approach until she was standing directly beside Dr. Hawthorne. The effect was startling, and Marcus saw all 3 officers reach instinctively for their weapons before catching themselves. "The modifications emerge from necessity and observation," Aurora said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate directly in the listeners' minds. "When survival depends upon efficiency, innovation becomes inevitable." Commander Torres stared at Aurora with growing alarm. "Captain Chen, what exactly is this creature? Our briefings mentioned an exotic companion, but this is clearly something far more significant." Marcus felt the careful balance of their isolated existence beginning to collapse. Aurora remained calm, but he could sense the subtle changes in her posture that suggested she was preparing for potential violence. Her amber eyes had taken on a luminescent quality that made her appear both beautiful and terrifying. "Aurora is a survivor," Marcus said carefully. "I found her during a salvage operation and couldn't leave her to die." "Aurora," Dr. Hawthorne repeated, her voice filled with sudden recognition. "Captain, do you realize what you've done? Aurora was the name of the Zephyrian princess who disappeared when the Imperial flagship was destroyed. If this creature is who I think it is, you're harboring the most wanted fugitive in known space." The tension in the room became electric. Aurora tilted her head slightly, studying each of the visitors with predatory focus. When she spoke, her voice had acquired an edge that made everyone present step back involuntarily. "Fugitive implies guilt of some crime," she said softly. "I am guilty only of surviving the genocide of my people." "Perhaps you should consider whether that survival threatens you." Commander Torres reached for her communicator, but Aurora moved faster than human eyes could follow. One moment she was standing near Dr. Hawthorne, the next she was beside Torres, her hand gently but firmly preventing the commander from activating her device. "I suggest we discuss this situation calmly," Aurora said, though there was nothing calm about the display of speed and precision she had just demonstrated. "Violence would be unfortunate for all involved." Marcus stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation before it escalated beyond control. "Commander, Aurora has lived peacefully on my farm for 2 years. She's never threatened anyone or posed any danger to human space." "Peaceful?" Torres said, her voice strained. "Captain, You're harboring the heir to an empire that once controlled half the galaxy. Even if she's currently peaceful, do you have any idea what she could become?" Aurora released Torres's hand and stepped back, but her presence continued to dominate the room. "I have become exactly what I was meant to become," she said. "The question is whether humanity chooses to see that as an opportunity or a threat." Dr. Hawthorne, despite her obvious fear, couldn't contain her scientific curiosity. "The genetic modifications are extraordinary. Accelerated development, enhanced physical capabilities, expanded neural capacity. Your parents prepared you for something specific, didn't they?" Aurora's expression shifted, becoming thoughtful rather than threatening. "My parents foresaw the fall of the old order. They understood that survival required evolution beyond traditional biological constraints. I am not the last Zephyrian, Dr. Hawthorne. I am the first of what Zephyrians must become." "And what is that?" Torres asked, though Marcus could tell she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Adaptation," Aurora replied simply. "The galaxy has become a place where the weak are consumed by the strong. The hegemony succeeds because they embrace brutality and conquest. The old Zephyrian Empire failed because it clung to outdated concepts of honor and restraint. I represent a synthesis of Zephyrian wisdom and predatory effectiveness." The visitors remained on the farm for 3 more hours, conducting a thorough investigation of Aurora's capabilities and the technological modifications she had created. What they discovered clearly exceeded their expectations and caused considerable alarm among the Earth Command representatives. Aurora demonstrated abilities that bordered on the supernatural. Her reflexes operated faster than human nervous systems could process. Her strength allowed her to manipulate materials that should have required industrial equipment. Most disturbing of all, her intellectual capabilities seemed to be continuing to expand at an exponential rate. "She's been reading through our entire technical database," Dr. Hawthorne reported quietly to Commander Torres. "In the past hour, she's absorbed and processed information that would take human experts months to understand, not just reading it, but comprehending and improving upon it." Aurora's interactions with the visitors revealed another unsettling aspect of her development. She seemed capable of reading human emotional and psychological states with uncanny accuracy, responding to unspoken thoughts and anticipating reactions before they occurred. It was as if she could perceive human consciousness at levels that normal beings couldn't access. When the Earth Command team prepared to leave, Commander Torres made one final attempt to assert authority over the situation. "Captain Chen, I'm ordering you to bring that creature to Earth Command headquarters for proper evaluation and containment." Aurora's response was swift and decisive. She moved to intercept Torres before the commander could reach her shuttle, blocking the path with movements so graceful they seemed choreographed. Her voice carried absolute authority as she spoke. "Commander Torres, you misunderstand the nature of this situation. I am not a creature to be contained or evaluated. I am the heir to an empire that spanned star systems when humanity was still discovering fire. More importantly, I am something new, something that your databases and protocols cannot categorize." She gestured toward the surrounding mountains, where Marcus now noticed subtle signs of defensive installations that Aurora had somehow constructed without his knowledge. Energy barriers flickered briefly visible. Automated weapons systems revealed themselves, and sensor arrays that hadn't been there that morning hummed with active power. "This farm is not just a hiding place," Aurora continued. "It is a foundation. From here I will build something that can challenge the hegemony and restore balance to a galaxy that has forgotten the meaning of justice." Commander Torres looked around at the defensive systems with growing amazement and fear. "You're planning a war." "I am planning survival," Aurora corrected. "For myself, for Marcus, for humanity, and for every species that the hegemony seeks to destroy or enslave. The old ways of thinking, the traditional approaches to galactic politics, have failed. What the galaxy needs now is not another empire, but something entirely new. The Earth Command team departed that evening, carrying with them reports that would send shockwaves through human space. Aurora watched their shuttle disappear into the star-filled sky with an expression of calm satisfaction. "They will warn their superiors about me," she said to Marcus as they stood together on the farm's observation deck. "Earth Command will debate whether to support me or attempt to eliminate me as a threat. The hegemony will eventually learn of my survival and send forces to destroy me." Marcus felt a chill as he realized that their peaceful isolation was ending. "What happens now?" Aurora turned to him, her amber eyes reflecting the starlight with an inner fire. "Now we discover whether the galaxy is ready for what I have become. The child you rescued is gone, Marcus. What stands before you is something that was designed to be either salvation or destruction, depending upon the choices that others make." She placed a hand on his shoulder, and Marcus could feel the strength and confidence that radiated from her transformed form. "You gave me the gift of growth and learning in safety. Now I must give the galaxy the gift of evolution or conquest. The choice of which it will be belongs to those who would oppose me." As they watched the stars wheel overhead, Marcus understood that Aurora had become something far beyond his ability to guide or protect. She was no longer the helpless cub he had rescued from the wreckage of a dead empire. She had become a force that would reshape the galaxy one way or another. The question that remained was whether that reshaping would come through wisdom or through war. The Galactic Predator. 6 months after the Earth Command visit, the galaxy had learned to fear the name Aurora. What had begun as whispered reports from frontier worlds had evolved into confirmed sightings of a new type of warship unlike anything in known technology databases. The vessels bore no identifying marks, appeared and disappeared without using conventional faster-than-light drives, and left behind devastation that defied analysis. The first major engagement occurred when a hegemony fleet attempted to subjugate the mining colonies of the Kepler system. 300,000 civilians faced enslavement or death when 12 heavy cruisers arrived to enforce hegemony rule. The Colonial Defense Force consisted of 6 outdated patrol boats that couldn't have delayed the invasion by more than a few minutes. Instead, the hegemony fleet encountered something that their tactical computers couldn't classify. A single ship, roughly the size of a heavy cruiser but with design elements that seemed to flow and shift like living tissue, emerged from what appeared to be empty space. Its hull reflected light in ways that suggested materials beyond conventional understanding, and its energy signatures registered patterns that no known technology could produce. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it ended, the hegemony fleet had been systematically disabled, their crews transported to escape pods, and their vessels reduced to scrap metal floating in orbit around Kepler Prime. The mysterious ship disappeared as suddenly as it had arrived, leaving behind only a brief transmission broadcast on all frequencies. "The innocent will be protected. The aggressive will face consequences. Evolution has begun." The voice was unmistakably Aurora's, though it carried harmonic qualities that seemed to resonate directly in the listener's consciousness. Admiral Rex Morrison, commanding the Earth Defense Fleet, played the recording dozens of times, each repetition revealing new layers of meaning and implication. Computer analysis suggests that the speaker has undergone significant physiological changes, reported Dr. Sarah Kim, who had joined Earth Command as a specialist in xenobiology. Voice pattern recognition confirms it's the same individual Captain Chen rescued, but the vocal modifications indicate development far beyond normal Zephyrian parameters. Morrison studied the tactical reports with growing concern. The ship's capabilities suggested technology centuries ahead of anything in human databases. Its ability to appear and disappear implied mastery of space-time manipulation that bordered on the supernatural. Most disturbing of all, its precision in combat suggested a level of tactical intelligence that could outthink the most advanced military strategists. "What do we know about her current location?" Morrison asked. "Nothing definitive," Kim replied. "The ship seems to exist outside normal space-time when not actively engaging targets. Our best guess is that she's somehow folded space around New Montana, creating a pocket dimension where conventional detection methods can't reach her." The second engagement occurred 3 weeks later when Aurora intervened in a hegemony attack on a human refugee convoy. 50,000 civilians fleeing the destruction of their home world faced annihilation from a hegemony battle group that had been hunting them for months. The convoy's escort consisted of 4 Earth Defense Force destroyers, brave but hopelessly outgunned. This time, witnesses survived to provide detailed accounts of Aurora's capabilities. Her ship materialized directly between the hegemony forces and the refugee convoy, its hull rippling with energy patterns that seemed to bend light and matter around itself. What followed wasn't a battle so much as a demonstration of absolute technological superiority. Aurora's vessel deployed weapons that operated on principles unknown to galactic science, energy beams that passed harmlessly through friendly targets while devastating hostile ships. Defensive fields that absorbed incoming fire and redirected it back at attackers with amplified force. Most remarkable of all, tractor beams that could manipulate matter at the molecular level, allowing her to disassemble enemy vessels without harming their crews. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, commanding the convoy escort, submitted a report that sent shockwaves through Earth Command. "The pilot of the unknown vessel established direct communication with my ship's computer systems without using any detectable transmission method. She identified herself as Aurora, expressed sympathy for the refugees' plight, and requested permission to escort the convoy to safety." Aurora's ship had guided the refugee convoy through 3 more star systems, protecting them from additional hegemony patrols and ensuring their safe arrival at a human colony world. Before disappearing, she had transmitted detailed star charts showing safe routes through hegemony space, intelligence that proved invaluable for subsequent rescue operations. The most significant engagement occurred when the hegemony decided to eliminate Aurora as a threat to their expansion. Fleet Admiral Vaxon, the hegemony's most experienced military commander, assembled a battle group of 50 heavy cruisers equipped with their most advanced weaponry. Intelligence reports suggested that Aurora was operating from somewhere in the New Montana system, making it their primary target. What the hegemony fleet found when they arrived was not a single mysterious ship, but a fortress that defied comprehension. Aurora had transformed the entire New Montana system into a defensive network that utilized the planet's moons, asteroid belts, and even the star itself as components in a massive weapons platform. The battle for New Montana became legendary throughout human space. Aurora didn't just defend against the hegemony attack. She orchestrated a systematic demonstration of technological superiority that redefined concepts of warfare and power. Energy barriers that spanned millions of kilometers absorbed the hegemony fleet's firepower, while automated defense platforms picked off individual ships with surgical precision. Marcus, watching from the farm's observation deck, witnessed the transformation of the young cub he had rescued into something that transcended traditional concepts of life and power. Aurora moved through the battle like a conductor orchestrating a symphony, her consciousness apparently distributed throughout the defensive network she had created. 47 hegemony vessels disabled, Aurora's voice announced through the farm's communication system. Crews evacuated to life pods. Admiral Vaxon's flagship isolated for interrogation. Total engagement time, 43 minutes. The scale of Aurora's victory was unprecedented in galactic history. A single individual had defeated a fleet that should have been capable of conquering entire star systems. More importantly, she had done so while minimizing casualties, even among her enemies. The hegemony crews were rescued and repatriated, carrying with them reports of Aurora's capabilities that spread fear throughout their empire. Admiral Vaxon himself was transported to the farm for a personal audience with Aurora. The proud hegemony commander, a reptilian humanoid whose species had dominated lesser civilizations for centuries, found himself face to face with something that challenged his fundamental understanding of power and dominance. Aurora had changed significantly since her encounter with Earth Command. She now stood nearly 3 meters tall, her golden fur having evolved into something that resembled liquid metal more than biological tissue. Her movements generated subtle distortions in space-time around her, and her amber eyes held depths that suggested consciousness operating on multiple dimensional levels simultaneously. "Admiral Vaxon," Aurora said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to emerge from the air itself rather than from her throat. "Your empire has built its power on the subjugation of weaker species. You believe that strength gives you the right to dominate others. Today, you learn that strength is relative, and your perspective has been limited." Vaxon, despite his fear, maintained the dignity of his rank. "What are you?" he asked. "No single being possesses the power you have demonstrated." "I am evolution," Aurora replied. "My people created me to be the synthesis of wisdom and strength, intellect and instinct, compassion and ruthlessness. I am what becomes necessary when civilization fails to protect the innocent." Aurora gestured, and holographic displays materialized around them, showing the extent of hegemony conquests and the suffering they had caused. Billions of sentient beings enslaved, entire species driven to extinction, worlds stripped of resources and left barren. The scope of destruction was staggering. "Your empire has become a cancer in the galaxy," Aurora continued. "It grows by consuming others, contributing nothing but death and suffering. This cannot continue." Admiral Vaxon straightened, his military pride reasserting itself despite his circumstances. "The hegemony will never surrender to a single individual, regardless of her power. We have fleets throughout the galaxy, military installations on 1,000 worlds, and the loyalty of conquered species who serve us willingly." Aurora's expression shifted slightly, and for a moment Vaxon glimpsed something in her eyes that made him step backward involuntarily. It wasn't anger or hatred, but something far more terrifying: absolute certainty. "Admiral, you misunderstand the nature of what is happening. I am not seeking the hegemony's surrender. I am offering it the opportunity to evolve or face extinction. Your choice will determine whether your empire transforms into something beneficial to galactic civilization or simply ceases to exist." To demonstrate her point, Aurora shared with Vaxon a vision of what the galaxy could become under her guidance. Worlds where different species collaborated rather than competed, where technology was used to enhance life rather than destroy it, where conflicts were resolved through wisdom rather than warfare. It was a vision of peace and prosperity that seemed almost impossibly utopian. "This is what I can create," Aurora explained, "but only if those who currently hold power choose to relinquish their destructive ambitions. The alternative is that I will systematically dismantle every military force, every oppressive government, and every institution that perpetuates suffering until nothing remains but the foundation for something better." Admiral Vaxon realized that he was not negotiating with another military commander or political leader. Aurora had become something that operated on a scale beyond traditional concepts of war and diplomacy. She was offering to remake galactic civilization according to her vision, with or without the cooperation of existing power structures. "You would remake the entire galaxy?" Vaxon asked. "The galaxy is already remaking itself," Aurora replied. "Species are evolving, civilizations are rising and falling, and the balance of power is constantly shifting. I am simply accelerating the process and ensuring that it moves toward creation rather than destruction. Aurora released Admiral Vaxon with a message for the hegemony leadership. Submit to transformation under her guidance, or face systematic elimination. Similar messages were transmitted to Earth Command, the Centauri Alliance, the Free Worlds Federation, and every other major political entity in known space. The responses varied from outraged defiance to cautious negotiation, but Aurora had made her position clear. She would not simply defend against aggression or limit herself to protecting the innocent. She had become something that intended to reshape galactic civilization according to her own evolved understanding of justice and efficiency. Marcus watched these developments with a mixture of awe and sorrow. The helpless cub he had rescued had fulfilled the destiny her parents had engineered into her genetic code. She had become the apex predator of galactic space, capable of hunting down and eliminating any threat to her vision of what the galaxy should become. "Do you regret what I've become?" Aurora asked him one evening as they stood together in the garden behind the farmhouse. Her presence warped space around them, creating aurora-like patterns in the air that danced with impossible beauty. Marcus considered the question carefully. "I regret that you had to become this," he said finally. "But I don't regret saving you, and I don't regret what you're trying to accomplish." Aurora nodded, her expression showing traces of the young being who had once asked him about her parents and their fate. The galaxy needed something beyond traditional concepts of power and authority. My parents understood this and created me to be that something, but they also ensured that I would understand compassion and justice, not just strength and dominance. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. Aurora gestured toward the stars, where her ships were already moving toward their next objectives. "Now the galaxy learns that evolution is not optional. Those who embrace positive change will be guided and protected. Those who resist will discover that I am equally capable of creation and destruction." As Aurora's influence spread throughout the galaxy, it became clear that she had become something unprecedented in galactic history. Not merely a conqueror or liberator, but a force of directed evolution that would transform civilization whether its leaders chose to cooperate or not. The forsaken cub that Marcus had rescued had become the galaxy's new apex predator, and her hunt for justice had only just begun. The age of traditional empires and military dominance was ending. In its place, Aurora was creating something new, a galactic civilization guided by evolved intelligence and tempered by hard-won wisdom. Whether this transformation would ultimately be seen as salvation or conquest would depend on the choices made by those who encountered the creature that had once been a helpless orphan crying alone in the wreckage of a dead empire.